F1. Red flag. Red flag's to slow down. What?
The checkered flag is waiting.
I can see our Checkered Flag podcast being quite spicy.
5 Live's Checkered Flag podcast.
And breathe. We are fresh off the back of the second sprint race of the season. It was won by Max Verstappen, yeah. But it was a thriller. Wet to dry conditions, close-knit fighting up and down the field, and risky strategy calls. Joining myself, Harry Benjamin, to chat through it all is former Williams driver Jack Aitken. Jack, that was pure entertainment.
It was brilliant. And I think that although it's debatable whether or not that came as a result of the conditions or because it's a sprint, we were all very pleased to have had some entertainment on a Saturday afternoon. And it was quite the show, not just on the first lap, but even towards the end, as we had strategy coming into play as well, with many cars making that jump to the slick and taking the chance, rolling the dice to get some of those valuable points at the end.
Yeah, now on paper, it may look like same old with Verstappen winning by over 20 seconds. But in those first couple of laps, it was very heated between himself and Sergio Perez, who got a really good start, diving down the inside of turn 1 again at turn 2. They almost took each other off the track and forced pretty much everybody behind them to kind of suffer a huge sort of gaggle behind.
Yeah, it had a really big knock-on effect to the field, and it all started because, as Max said in his interview, he got a bit of wheel spin off the line in these tricky conditions. Checo got the jump, was fully alongside into turn 1. All good, no major issues so far. Went up the inside, completed the move, but got a little bit wide on the exit curve, lost some traction. And Max started to do a bit of an undercut, coming back to the right-hand side, the inside for the turn 3 at the end of the straight. Checo claims that he didn't see Max. I'm not sure that I buy that personally. I think that's just what he's using to diffuse the situation after the fact. Either way, he forced him off the road onto the grass, and Max backed out because he really had no choice. It was going to be a crash if he didn't. He managed to throw it back down the inside at turn 3, and the body language of the car was angry. He was really being aggressive, and basically gave Perez the option to cede the position or have an accident. Perez ceded, but in doing all of that, they really slowed down on the exit of turn 3, and Lando Norris in particular was held up quite badly and lost a lot of positions on the exit.
Yeah, he really was. Well, it was Verstappen and Perez the top two, but it was a little bit of friction between the two in part third. Let's hear what they both had to say.
It was, of course, about lap 1. I mean, out of turn 1, I had a good run after a poor start, and at the time, of course, it looked like he just pushed me off into the grass, and that could have been a big shunt. But that's why immediately after the race, I wanted to have a chat just to ask his vision of it, and he said he didn't see me, so I trust his word, of course, on that.
Yeah, I think the conditions didn't help. Visibility was very poor out there, and we went over the limit, both of us. We've spoken about it. It's all fine between us, and at the end, I'm happy that the team didn't pay the price for that. We've spoken about it, and it's all good now.
Well, there are two different sides to every story. The BBC's chief F1 writer, Andrew Benson, joins us as well. Are we making a bit of a mountain out of a molehill here?
Well, Verstappen's telling us not to. He was in the press conference after he did those interviews on the track, and he was asked, was that all okay? Was it the right way to race? It could have compromised the team result. And he gave the question quite short shrift. He basically said it might have, but it didn't. We don't have to make a big story. It happened. We talked about it. And then you don't have to write a whole article about it, or maybe you can for the clicks.
Are you in the middle of writing the article about it?
I don't know. There's other things to talk about as well, which we might get on to a bit later, because a couple of the drivers have expressed some quite strong opinions about the accident that happened at Spa earlier today. But they're trying to play it down now. But Verstappen's like an elephant. That I've heard that phrase used about him by the Red Bull team. He doesn't forget, and is what that means, because you're pulling a slightly quizzical face at me there, Harry.
Well, I'm just thinking of, where did he not forget Sao Paulo last year, wasn't he?
He didn't forget in Sao Paulo about what happened in Monaco, which was, if people remember what happened, was he believed that Perez had deliberately crashed in qualifying to compromise Verstappen's lap, and it was only Verstappen's lap. It stopped Verstappen beating Perez, getting ahead of Perez on the second row with the Ferraris on a front row lockout at the time. I think Verstappen thought he could have been on the front row there. He didn't like the fact that, as he saw it, the very first opportunity Perez had to screw him over, for want of a better way of describing it, he took it, and he what happened in Brazil, where he refused to help him and get the points to try and beat Charles Leclerc to second in the championship, was payback for that. And we heard the conversations on team radio where he said, I told you I wasn't going to give him the place back. Why are you asking me again? We don't have to talk about this ever again. We got to Abu Dhabi. It was all, oh, don't worry, it's all under control. They've talked about it. I'm told they didn't properly talk about what happened in Monaco, actually. And here we are now, a few races down the line. He's not going to forget this either.
Well, that is ominous, isn't it? Looking forward to the article on that, Andrew, later. But that's the top two. Red Bull 1 and 2 at Shot Horror. Let's see what happens in the race, because Perez has more to do for the Grand Prix tomorrow. Further back, though, Carlos Sainz finished third in the Ferrari in front of the two Aston Martin. Stroll ahead of Alonso. Hulkenberg in the Haas finished in 6th. Ocon in the Alpine was 7th. Russell, who was the first to make the switch onto the slick tyres in the drying conditions in his Mercedes, and managed to get a point for his brave move in 8th in front of Norris and Hamilton, the top 10, Piastri, Leclerc, Albon, Magnussen, Gasly, the top 15, Tsunoda, De Vries, Sargent, Zhou Guanyu and Valtteri Bottas making up the remainder of the field. Jack, should we have a word on Carlos? It was a bit of a quiet race, actually, for him in the Ferrari. We didn't see much of him. Pretty decent moves in that Ferrari to get himself up to third. Contrast that to the other Ferrari of Leclerc, who was dicing left, right and centre in the battle for 7th, and ended up 12th at the end.
Yeah, it was a quiet race, but strong for Carlos. I think he's bounced back from the woes that he had in qualifying, where he was nearly knocked out due to mechanical issues. And he was on the tail of Checo towards the end. He was saying he was able to get up to the Red Bull, but as soon as he got into the dirty air, then he was struggling a bit more. Maybe he overcooked the tyres a little bit in trying to get closer to Checo, and it's very easy to do on the Inters. But generally, the pace looked really strong today, and I think it was a strong drive from him.
It certainly was a good race then from Sainz, and we can hear from him. He's talking to Lawrence Barretto.
Honestly, very happy to be P3 today after how the day started with the brake-by-wire issue in Q1 and only managing to do one lap to then progress the way we did through quali and put ourselves today in B3. I think is the maximum, so very happy with this Saturday.
You've been looked good all across the whole weekend. You must be excited about the prospect of what you can achieve tomorrow.
Yes, I've been very comfortable, especially today, since the first lap of quali. That was actually my only lap of quali Q1. I looked very quick and very at ease with the car, and kept the feeling through in the wet, and hopefully tomorrow in the dry I've confirmed a bit the step, and we can be strong in the whole race.
Can you take the fight to Max?
It's a lot to ask right now.
We didn't say no straight away this time, so that's good.
No, but, I never say no, never say never, but you know how tricky it will be. We are in a good position though, with two cars right behind him and ready to attack.
Good luck.
Lawrence asking Carlos Sainz for an awful lot of optimism there at the end, but it really is Sainz a really good turnaround after that brake-by-wire issue in qualifying. Only one lap to get through to the next part, and so far having the better of his teammate Leclerc. Talk of teammates though, and behind Carlos Sainz was Lance Stroll in the Aston Martin, only just ahead of Fernando Alonso, which we don't see too much. And a reminder, obviously Stroll's dad owns the team. Fernando Alonso, well, is Fernando Alonso. And towards the end, especially in the dry conditions, neither Aston Martin had changed onto the slick tyre, so they had jumped up the order a little bit, looking at 4th and 5th, so, decent points on offer for both of them. Interesting move, though, nothing coming over the radio to say, well, come on, Lance, Alonso could have a crack at Carlos here for 3rd, just to get us a couple more points. Why didn't that come?
Yeah, it's a good question. We're never entirely sure if it did come, because we don't get all of the radio messages broadcast to us, but it didn't sound like there was a call for that. And normally it's the driver that pushes for that, the driver behind, of course, who's saying, look, I'm faster, give me a chance, and if I don't get ahead, then I'll give the place back, whatever. And it sounds like Fernando wasn't making those requests either. And it could well be that he was playing the long game and trying to make sure that he didn't upset anybody. And even at the end, he was doing some sort of faux attempts to overtake. I think they were faux attempts, because he was all over the back of Stroll through the last lap, showing his nose here and there, driving up the outside and then pulling back. And it didn't look like he was really committed to actually overtaking Stroll. He just kind of wanted to show, look, I'm here, I'm fighting my teammate, really, I promise. So he beat me on merit.
I agree. I mean, Fernando Alonso wants to overtake someone, he doesn't do that sort of thing. Look at what happened in Bahrain, for example, with Lewis Hamilton and Carlos Sainz. They're probably the two best overtaking manoeuvres of the season so far. He's possibly, arguably, the best overtaker in Formula One. That's not what he does normally when he's racing, Jack, is it? When he's trying to pass someone. So, look, I think Fernando Alonso will have looked at that situation a bit like he did in Spain 2 races ago. It's the sprint race. There's only 1 point in it. For him, the big picture is he doesn't want to unsettle anything. Aston Martin, he's very happy there. He's got a competitive car. Everything's going swimmingly, more swimmingly than he could ever have imagined when he signed the contract last August. And he's well aware that the team's run by and owned by Lawrence Stroll, who's Lance Stroll's father. He knows that he's going to beat Stroll 9 times out of 10. There have been a couple of races where he's found himself behind him, but the points on offer weren't that big. Was it worth making a fight over it? I think he's a smart enough guy to think, I'll just sit here for now. Thanks. We'll worry about this tomorrow.
Well, let's see what he did say. He's with the Lawrence.
Yeah, it was close, but happy with the overall points. I think 3 points more than Ferrari, 8 points more than Mercedes, so good Saturday for us.
And just generally, the pace of the car and the conditions, you look like you judged everything pretty well as well, and you must be really encouraged by that.
Yeah, I think it was a difficult race for sure with the conditions, and we had to make decisions on the grid, not knowing the track conditions and things like that. So I think all in all, as I said, a good points in the pocket and hopefully more tomorrow.
It's always so interesting hearing from Fernando because he's straight away out of the car. He knows exactly how many more points he's scored than his nearest rivals. Makes the point about Mercedes. They are coming into this weekend. They were 13 points ahead in the constructors. So it really does play on his mind. So perhaps Alonso really is playing the long game and being rather politically savvy, shall we say. But he ended up fourth. Stroll was fourth. Alonso was fifth, and they were in front of the Haas of Nico Hülkenberg, Jack. Now, Hülkenberg had an amazing start and really benefited from the fact that Norris got bunched up behind the 2 Red Bulls who were fighting for first and second. And Hülkenberg, who started fourth, then managed to really make the gain up into P2 in the wet conditions right at the start and held it, actually, for quite a few laps before he started to slip back.
Yeah, surprisingly long time, wasn't it? We kind of expected that Checo might just jump ahead within a lap or two, and it just didn't happen. He couldn't get past the Haas for a very long time, and Nico did a great job. He was, not losing that much time to Verstappen. When you look at the gap between Verstappen and Perez at the end of the race and what Hülkenberg was maintaining, the pace was quite okay. He may have cooked his inters a little bit in doing that and showing such good pace at the start of the race, but that then sort of prompted them to say, actually, we'd be, in a great position to be one of the guys to take the risk and go on the slick, because he was really starting to sink quite quickly at that point in the standings.
He really was. So it's a good couple of points for Haas to pick up there. We will talk more about the other driver who decided to make the call for slicks early doors, George Russell, along with Norris and Lewis Hamilton in just a few moments. Esteban Ocon was 7th in the Alpine. George Russell, though, in the Mercedes, managed to steal the final point, Jack, in a bit of a recovery after a hydraulics worry in the sprint shootout, the qualifying for the sprint race. Didn't manage to get out, started down the grid, so made some good gains, and he was really in this big, long fight that was involved pretty much everybody from 7th down, which included Ocon, Leclerc, Albon as well, not to mention Hamilton and Norris too. In the end, though, Russell was the first one who came into the pits to say, right, okay, this is slick tyres now, it is drying, and he made the right call.
Yeah, I was sort of getting flashbacks to Montreal when he made the call, was it last year, to jump onto the slicks and went straight into the wall at turn 2. But he got it absolutely right this time round. He was the first one to make the jump. It was dry enough on track, and he was setting purple sectors very quickly out of the box, and he took that advantage and carried it over anyone else that made the stop a lap or two later for a good few laps. Everyone did eventually get up to speed on the slicks, but he was still making really good progress, and I really doubt that he would have got that final point if he had stayed on the same strategy with the Inter.
Well, here's what he had to say about his race with Lawrence.
It's funny how people sort of jump on the bandwagon when one goes, everyone sort of follows. I think they probably would have finished ahead of me had they stayed where they were. I'm not too sure, and if maybe 2 more laps would have really changed things as well. So, yeah, tricky conditions. Glad to go P15 to P8, almost P7. All things considered, a pretty good race.
Did you make the call? Did you want to come in? Do you want to try something different?
Yeah, I said on the radio, if this was qualifying, I'm going slicks now. But obviously, I wasn't too sure of a race situation. Obviously, the team have a bigger picture. But it's very challenging because when you're in a queue of like 4 or 5 cars, you've got all the spray coming over you. And it's only when you're in clear air you actually realise how dry the track is. So you've got to sort of read through the spray, what's water. And on this rough tarmac, you could afford to get those slicks working.
George Russell there, who finished 8th and got the final point in front of Norris and Lewis Hamilton in the other Mercedes. No points on the board for him, but he did manage to finish 10th. So just sort of looking down the rest of the finishes, no really other big standouts massively. So Hamilton, started down in, I think it was 18th, wasn't it, in the end? Really good start, and was involved in the fight, but just wasn't quite close enough for points on this occasion.
Yeah, it was a bit of a nothing race for him, really, because he didn't commit early enough to the slick to really make that work. And when he did commit, he wasn't the latest, but when he did make that call and came out, he was really in the gaggle again, fighting with the McLaren of Norris and Albon and tripping up over each other, losing time while Russell was making hay ahead of them. And that kind of put paid to any sort of likelihood of him getting points. And I just wonder if he was, looking a bit at the bigger picture, saying, well, I'm just going to make sure I don't lose a nose here or don't do anything silly and get damaged ahead of tomorrow's Grand Prix. But yeah, not his finest, but it could have been worse.
Yeah. Any other standouts for you? And Piastri had a good run towards the end on the softs, but 11th for him.
Yeah, recovered
Albon
from
ended up
quali.
in 13th.
Yep.
Which is a shame for him, actually, because he was running up there. But pretty much everybody, the usual runners that you see at the back. Gasly not having a great weekend compared to his teammate Ocon. Gasly in the Alpine 15th, whereas Ocon was up in 7th. Tsunoda de Vries, Sargent Zhou Guanyu and Valtteri Bottas 19th and 20th, compounding a tough day at the office for Alfa Romeo in the sprint. Now, though, before we got the sprint race underway, we had a bit of sad news in the motorsport world as a young driver racing in the Formula Regional European Championship by Alpine at Spa-Francorchamps this weekend in Belgium. A championship that young racers take part in on the road on that junior ladder to Formula One. Delano van der Hoff, just 18 years old, involved in a big incident and has sadly passed away. Unfortunately, Jack, we've spoken about this already on the coverage, but we have seen incidents like this before, particularly at Spa, and the tributes have been pouring out, not just amongst the motorsport world, but particularly within the Formula One world as well.
Yeah, it's absolutely tragic, and all of our thoughts obviously go out to Donato's friends and family. We're seeing quite a few calls from, I think Lance Stroll gave an interview, quite a passionate one, where he was calling for changes to be made. And this is actually referencing the fact that we had an incident that many are saying is quite similar with Antoine Hubert, obviously, who tragically lost his life 4 years ago in a similar place on the circuit at Spa. I would say, although there are similarities, which is to say the type of collision, it was a multiple car accident, and it's obviously at the same circuit, I think we should not be too quick to jump to conclusions. It is very different in terms of the factors that led to the collision. It was very wet. They have a lot of rain in Spa at the moment. There was a lot of spray. And although people are saying it was in the same corner, it's really not. Antoine had his accident at Radion, the top of Eau Rouge, where it's a blind crest. And the walls used to be quite close. They have made changes to that since that accident. Whereas this accident happened on the Kemmel Straight further along, and it was really due to the poor visibility that the accident took place. There are absolutely a lot of things that we need to learn from this. In spray like that, you really can't see more than 10 meters in front of you in these cars. You're entirely trusting the drivers in front of you to not lift and just hoping to hope that you don't have anyone slow or stopped on track, because there really isn't anything that you can do about it at that stage. And obviously this is the situation that we've had, and it is very, very sad to lose someone so young. Now, we have had a lot of changes to Radion, as I've said. They're good changes. I can attest to that. I had quite a nasty accident myself a year or two ago, and they've really opened up the barrier space there, runoff space, and moved the barriers back. It's still a blind corner, it's still dangerous, but this is a different accident, I think, and I'm sure that lessons will be learned and time taken to analyse it. But for now, we really just need to think of all of his colleagues, the drivers, the team staff, and nobody should, have to suffer what they are going through in the workplace effectively this weekend.
Yeah, and well, that absolutely echo all those sentiments. It's good context, actually, because we can hear what Lance Stroll said exactly about the incident in Spa.
Well, my head's not really thinking about the race right now. We lost a driver in Spa today, and a young kid, Delano, and we lost a member of the racing community, and it's not fair what happened today. That corner needs to be changed. We've been saying it for years. We've lost 2 kids now in like a span of 5 years. The corner needs to be changed, and we're going to be there in a few weeks, so seriously need to think about that.
Well, that was Lance Stroll speaking there quite strongly. Andrew, have any of the other drivers or teams spoken out about this too?
Well, Stroll went on to say in his written media press conference to expanded on that point a bit. He's talking about Formula 1 playing with fire, and what he's talking about is cars coming back onto the track having gone off at Raidillon. Now, as Jack said, that's not exactly what happened this time, although I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, there was an earlier accident at Raidillon in the same race which happened before or just before this happened, this fatal accident, which was a bit further down the straight. But the general point remains the same. Is a car, even if it's not the same accident, it was still a car that had gone off and then come back onto the track and got hit by another car, which is what happened to Hubert, even albeit actually on the exit of Raidillon, in his case on the straight in the case of today. And Max Verstappen has also commented. He said we have to look at what we can do better to protect drivers because today was unnecessary, clearly. Now, he didn't specify exactly what he was talking about in terms of what was unnecessary. Maybe he thought the race should have been stopped earlier before events could unfold to the point where they did, where this fatal accident happened. But clearly a number of the drivers are upset. I haven't heard all the interviews yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if other drivers are also saying something, because it's clearly something they've been talking within the GPDA about and with the FIA. And Spa, as Lance Stroll said, is Silverstone next, followed by Hungary, followed by Spa. So 3 races time, Formula 1's going to be there. The cars are much bigger, much faster. And I don't know what the drivers are going to ask for, what they can have, because as Jack said, changes have already been made in that section of the track, quite significant ones. But it's something they clearly want something done about.
Absolutely. Well, all of our thoughts are with those involved and those affected by the sad passing of the 18-year-old racing driver Delano van der Hoff, and the Formula 1 world very much thinking of him at the moment. But the racing does go on, especially here in Austria for the Red Bull Ring, and we will be getting going for the Grand Prix on Sunday, which will be on BBC Radio 5 Live, so do join us for that, and then we'll have all the reaction, of course, on the Chequered Flag podcast. So make sure you keep subscribed and keep a lookout for that, and all the very latest that will unfold between now and then will be available on the BBC Sport website and app. My thanks to Andrew Benson, to Jack Aitken. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.